Hello friends, again I'm coming from the mostly empty studio space as I am about ready to move. So I'm trying to get ahead by filming a few short videos so that I can take a couple weeks and actually unpack and organize everything, because it's been a mad dash getting everything packed. So for this week, I'm going to review one of the oldest books in my collection. Not oldest as in oldest published, but one I have owned the longest, because it is one of my first purchases back when I was a little witchling, a little beginning practitioner of stuffs. And that is Sigil Witchery by Laura Tempest Zakroff. I love this book because I was not particularly artistically inclined growing up. I have struggled greatly, and this broke sigils down in a way that was so much more approachable to me than just the madness in my head of like putting all your letters in a grid and then drawing lines between each one, because this breaks down individual aspects of sigils, like to the foundational level of dots, to lines, to arrows, etc., which really appealed to my brain since I had studied heraldry as a teenager. So with that short introduction, let's get into it. The contents of this book are actually very simple. This is a resource book and a how-to more so than like a detailed history of sigils. While there is a chapter on the history of sigils, I'm just going to read a piece of the introduction so that you have a bit of context of where this came from. Imagine a large hotel meeting room packed to maximum capacity with all sorts of pagans, displaying a wide range of ages, backgrounds, and experience. They've chosen to attend this workshop on sigil magic over at least a dozen other options, all happening at the same time on the busy convention schedule. Even though I've been teaching workshops on metaphysics, art, and dance for 20 years, I was battling a fair amount of anxiety. This was the first time I'd be introducing my take on sigils to such a large audience. This is the culmination of a vast number of presentations, a vast number of teaching opportunities, and it is intended for both entry level and intermediate, I would say. This is not particularly advanced, but this book is broken into 6 chapters. Let's get to the right one. So after the introduction, there is a brief history of mark making, which goes through how most societies have had very similar ideas or similar uses of various sigils. Not necessarily sigils, but like the components of them. In this chapter, at the top of each page is the type of mark and then a description of how they've been used. So using the X as an example, similar to the cross, the X is an intersection of diagonal lines, which makes for more dynamic, active energy. In maps and myth, X often marks the spot. In basic math, the X can be the symbol for multiplication, while in algebra it is often the variable or unknown value in the equation we're trying to solve. X is also used to mark a place for a signature or to take the place of one. In a similar vein, X, now more commonly seen as XOXO, has been used to signify a kiss, as in love, a declaration of truth or loyalty. Yet it can also mark something that is forbidden and prohibited, as well as a hazard. Think of the stereotypical moonshine jug with the 3 X's inscribed on it. It is also the Roman numeral for 10. This is the level of detail on each of the marks, going all the way from a dot, a circle, arrows, squares, triangles, crescents, spirals, all the way up to more complicated symbols like scales, keyholes, butterflies, anchors, and that's where my brain went, ooh, I know this, because of my obsession with heraldry as a teenager. The third chapter is Making Magic, or how to put these various pieces together to make a more complex or complete spell. Essentially taking each of these letters that is part of a sigil and turning it into a full sentence. The fourth chapter is about design guidance, where she outlines how to design one that is clear and identifiable. It's very similar to like art instruction, actually, and how to strike the balance between sophisticated enough to be pretty, but simple enough to be easily accomplished. It also gives some hands-on advice of how to draw more easily certain types of symbols. Chapter 5 is practice exercises, which I really need to go back and do again because it's been a while. It's been, I think, 4 or 5 years, and I lost the notebook I did them in. Chapter 6 is a gallery where she shares many of her own. So she has full-on sigils and how she uses them. Some pictures of her sketchbooks and some sigils she has done for specific clients. So now that we've gone through what's inside of the book, clarity of writing. It is incredibly clear. Gets full marks from me for the language is simple enough to be easily understood, but specific to the parts of the book. So it is, like I said, entry-level people can read this and not have an issue. But it is not the traditional way of sigil making as is widely accepted in many traditions. This is her own method, and it's a method I actually really like because it's looking at it as a language instead of as just squiggles, I guess. Pleasure of reading. This was another one that I devoured. I read this in, I think, a day. Particularly in my early years as a folk healer, I was devouring books so quickly. I have gotten out of that habit. That's part of why I'm doing these book reviews, to hopefully get back into the habit of doing more research and reading more often. Pleasure of reading. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I read it in like a single day. And accuracy. Did they cite sources? Or is it personal gnosis? There is a large section in the back of bibliography and sources for additional research, which is actually really got a lot in it. And she broke it down into categories to make it easier to identify things by topic, because there's art and resource supplies, art history and culture, general symbols magic, Austin Osman Spare, so books about him, good starting places to explore other symbol systems, magical herbalism, witchcraft, and paganism. And one of the other things that I love is there is an index. I always love a good index because then I can find things later. So accuracy, there was a lot of thought and preparation put into this. This is not just, while there is a lot of personal gnosis in here, there's also well researched and thought out. This one, as an entry-level book, I think I will actually give a full 5 out of 5 stars. If you are a particularly advanced person or knows a lot about sigil making or the history of symbols, this probably is not the book for you. Unless you want to use it like I do at this point as just an encyclopedia, where I'm like, wait, what was the difference of this and that again? Like, because some symbols are very common, like stars. So sometimes it's nice to be able to go, oh, right, that's the difference between a 7 and a 5-pointed star. So I use this kind of as an encyclopedia of a symbolic alphabet. That being said, that is my review of Sigil Witchery. I hope you enjoyed it and that it will prove useful to you. Until next time, walk in the light, my friends.